You already know someone like this. Maybe it bothers you a little. Maybe it bothers you a lot. Someone who started with nothing, no connections, no inheritance, no safety net, and somehow ended up building something real. And the part that gets under your skin isn't their success. It's that you can't figure out what they have that you don't. Same city. Sometimes the same neighborhood. Same starting line. But somewhere along the way, something split the road. And I think you've been asking the wrong question this whole time. It's not about strategy. It's not about discipline. It's not even about money. It's about something that happens inside a person before any of that. A shift so quiet most people never notice it happening. That's what we're going to talk about today. Not the hustle. Not the habits. The psychology. The internal architecture of people who build wealth from zero, and why most people never get there, even when they want it more than anything. Most people approach money backwards. They look for the method first. The investment strategy. The side hustle. The spreadsheet. And none of that is wrong, but it's the second step being taken before the first one. And that's exactly why so many people start, make some progress, and then quietly go back to where they were. Because the strategy never had solid ground to stand on. Here's what I mean. Think about someone who grew up watching their parents fight about bills. Who learned, before they could even articulate it, that money is stress. That money is conflict. That money is something that runs out. That lesson didn't come from a classroom. It came from the kitchen table at 11 years old. From the tone of voice. From the silence after the argument stopped. That's not information. That's identity. And identity is a much heavier thing to move than a habit. The people who build wealth from nothing, and I mean real wealth, not a good month, not a lucky investment, they all went through some version of the same quiet crisis. A moment where they realized that the story they were living wasn't actually theirs. It was inherited. Passed down like furniture nobody chose but everybody kept. And that realization is uncomfortable. Because it means you can't just blame circumstance anymore. It means the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't just about opportunity or knowledge. It's about who you believe you are when nobody's watching. That's the thing that changes first. Before the bank account. Before the business. Before any of it. The person they become in their own mind, that comes first. And the world, almost reluctantly, starts to catch up. There's a pattern I keep coming back to. When you study the trajectory of people who built something real from nothing, you notice they didn't just tolerate hard things. They developed a different relationship with discomfort altogether. Not the kind of toxic resilience where you pretend nothing hurts. Something more honest than that. They stopped treating discomfort as a signal to stop. And started reading it as a signal that they were close to something. Most people, and this isn't a criticism, it's just how we're wired, most people experience discomfort and immediately begin negotiating with it. They delay the difficult conversation. They postpone the decision. They scroll for 20 minutes instead of sitting with the thought that's trying to surface. And every time they do that, the comfort zone gets a little more solid. A little harder to leave. But here's what's interesting about the people who actually cross that line. They're not fearless. That's the myth. Fearless people are either lying or haven't encountered real risk yet. The people who build from zero are often deeply aware of how much they have to lose, because for a long time, they didn't have much. And losing the little they had was a real possibility, not an abstract one. What separates them isn't the absence of fear. It's that they became more afraid of staying still than of moving forward. Think about what that actually means. At some point, the pain of the familiar became greater than the fear of the unknown. The dead-end job. The same arguments. The same bank balance at the end of every month. That specific kind of slow suffering, the kind that doesn't scream, just hums, became unbearable in a way that made risk feel almost like relief. That's a psychological shift most people never make. Because making it means admitting something hard. That where you are right now isn't just circumstances. It's also choices. Quiet, daily, almost invisible choices that compound just like interest does. And that's a heavy thing to sit with. But it's also, strangely, the most freeing thought you can have. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The relationship that broke people have with time looks completely different from the relationship that people building wealth have with it. And I don't mean productivity systems. I don't mean morning routines. I mean something deeper. Something almost philosophical. Most people live in what I call financial present tense. Everything is about now. The bill that's due. The weekend that needs to be paid for. The impulse that wants satisfying today. And it makes sense. When money is tight, the present is loud. It demands your full attention. You can't think about 5 years from now when you're not sure about next Friday. But there's a trap inside that logic. Because the present never stops being loud. And if you only move when the noise gets quiet, you never move at all. The people who climb out of nothing, they develop what I can only describe as a dual vision. They stay present enough to handle today, but they're always running a quiet calculation in the background. Every decision gets held up against a longer timeline. Not obsessively. Not rigidly. But consistently. That coffee isn't just $3. That's a small practice of either impulse or intention. That extra hour of work isn't just fatigue, it's a fraction of something being built. They don't dramatize these moments. They don't turn every small choice into a moral event. But they feel the weight of direction in a way most people don't. Think of it like navigation on a long sea crossing. You don't correct the course every 5 seconds. But you never fully forget where you're going either. Small adjustments, made consistently, over time, that's what keeps the ship from ending up somewhere completely unintended. And here's the part that's easy to miss. This isn't discipline in the punishing sense. It's not white-knuckle willpower. It's something closer to clarity. When you genuinely know what you're building toward, not as an abstract fantasy, but as something you've made real in your own mind, the small daily choices stop feeling like sacrifice. They start feeling like alignment. That's a completely different internal experience. One person is gritting their teeth. The other one is simply walking in a direction they've already chosen. Same action. Completely different psychology. And in the long run, the psychology is what determines everything. Nobody builds from zero without falling. That's not inspiration. That's just arithmetic. But the way these people process failure, that's where things get interesting. Because failure is universal. Everyone fails. The difference is never in the falling. It's in what happens in the hours and days after the ground meets your face. Most people, when something doesn't work, go through a very human sequence. First, the sting. Then the story. And the story is where the damage really happens. Because the story almost always becomes about identity. I failed quietly becomes I am a failure. The event becomes evidence. Evidence for something they suspected about themselves all along. And that suspicion, that quiet inner voice that says maybe I'm not built for this, that voice gets a little louder every time the story is told that way. The people who build from nothing do something different. And it's not that they're immune to that voice. They hear it too. But somewhere along the way they learn to treat failure like data rather than verdict. Not with toxic positivity. Not with forced reframing. Something more grounded than that. They ask different questions after things fall apart. Not why does this always happen to me, but what specifically didn't work, and what would I need to understand to make this less likely next time? That shift sounds small. It isn't. It's the difference between a closed loop and an open one. A closed loop keeps you in the same place. The same patterns. The same results. Wearing slightly different clothes each time but following the same internal script. An open loop learns. Adjusts. Moves. There's also something else. Something quieter. The people who eventually build real stability, they develop a tolerance for looking stupid. For being wrong in public. For starting something and having it not work while people around them watch. That tolerance is underrated almost beyond measure. Because most people never start the thing that could change their life. Not because they lack the knowledge or the capital. But because the cost of being seen trying and failing feels higher than the cost of never trying at all. That's not cowardice. That's just the way the brain calculates social risk. It's ancient wiring doing its job. But the people who get through, they find a way to make the internal cost of not trying feel heavier than the external cost of being seen failing. And once that switch flips, something opens up. Not confidence exactly. More like permission. Permission to be in process. Permission to not have it figured out yet. Permission to be someone still becoming rather than someone who already arrived. And that permission, quiet and private as it is, turns out to be one of the most valuable things a person can give themselves. There's a line I keep coming back to. You don't just build wealth alone. You build it inside an environment. And environment isn't just the city you live in or the job you work. Environment is the 5 or 6 people whose voices live rent-free inside your head. The ones whose opinions you hear even when they're not in the room. That's the environment that matters most. And most people dramatically underestimate how much it shapes them. Here's something that's difficult to say but important. A lot of people who grow up without money are surrounded by other people who grew up without money. And those communities are often full of warmth, loyalty, genuine love. But they can also carry something invisible and heavy, a shared ceiling. An unspoken agreement about how much is possible. About what people like us do and don't do. It's never said directly. It lives in small comments. In the joke that lands a little too close. In the subtle tension that appears when someone starts doing better than the group average. In the way ambition gets quietly reframed as arrogance. In the people who break through, they almost always describe a moment where they had to make a quiet, painful choice. Not to abandon where they came from, but to stop letting where they came from define where they were going. That's not a clean break. It's not dramatic. It's more like a slow, private renegotiation of which voices get the most weight. They start finding, deliberately or almost by accident, other people who are building. Not necessarily richer people. Not people with more credentials. Just people who are in motion. People for whom growth is the baseline assumption rather than the exception. And something shifts in the air around them. Because ambition is contagious. So is stagnation. Both spread through proximity, through conversation, through what gets normalized in a room. The people who build from nothing become almost instinctively protective of their attention. Of who gets access to their doubts. Of which conversations they walk away from feeling expanded versus which ones leave them smaller. That's not coldness. That's not elitism. It's something closer to self-preservation in the deepest sense. Because you can have the right mindset, the right strategy, the right work ethic, and still have all of it slowly drained away by an environment that can't hold the weight of who you're becoming. The climb out of nothing is hard enough as it is. The people who make it don't carry more than they have to. And one of the heaviest things a person can carry, heavier than debt, heavier than risk, heavier than failure, is a room full of people who need you to stay exactly where you are. If you've made it this far into this video with me, I want to take just a second. Not to interrupt, but to say something directly. If what we've been talking about is landing for you, if something in these last few minutes felt less like information and more like recognition, then this channel is where you should be. Hit subscribe. Because this is what we do here. Not hype. Not shortcuts. Just honest conversations about money, psychology, and what it actually takes to build something real. And I'll tell you why that matters specifically right now. Because what we're about to get into, this next part, this is the piece most people never hear. The part that sits underneath all the layers we've already pulled back. Here it is. There's a moment, and the people who've lived it know exactly what I'm talking about, where it stops being theoretical. Where the shift in identity, the new relationship with discomfort, the longer view of time, the better environment, where all of that stops being ideas and starts being lived experience. And it's not a celebration. It doesn't look the way you'd expect. It's quieter than that. Almost anticlimactic. It's a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing special happening. And you realize, without fanfare, without anyone telling you, that you are no longer the person who used to make a certain kind of decision. That the old pattern came up, and you just didn't follow it. Not because you were strong, but because it genuinely no longer fit who you are. That's the moment. Not the first big win. Not the number in the account crossing a threshold. Not the moment someone notices. The moment you notice, privately, that something actually changed. And here's what's fascinating about that moment: it's always smaller than the journey that built it. Years of quiet work, of uncomfortable choices, of protecting your direction when everything around you is pulling you sideways, and the arrival feels almost unremarkable. But that's exactly how you know it's real. Real transformation doesn't announce itself. It just quietly makes the old version of you feel like a stranger. So here's where we land. Not with a formula, not with a 5-step plan, but with something that I think is worth sitting with for a moment after this video ends. The people who build from nothing, truly from nothing, they don't become different people because they got money. They got money because they became different people. And that sequence matters more than almost anything else we've talked about today. The identity came first. The discomfort became information. The time horizon stretched. The failures became data. The environment got chosen instead of inherited. And then, slowly, almost without drama, the outside world began to reflect the inside one. That's not magic. That's not luck. That's something far more available than either of those things. It's a series of quiet, private, unglamorous decisions made consistently over time by someone who decided, at some point, for their own reasons, that the story they were living needed a different author. You already know if that's you. Not because I told you, but because something in the last 20 minutes didn't just pass through you. It stopped somewhere. That's worth paying attention to. Not tomorrow. Now. Because the gap between where you are and where you want to be isn't filled with more information. You have enough information. The gap is filled with the moment you decide that who you've been up until now is not the final version. That decision doesn't make noise. It just changes everything. If this conversation meant something to you, share it. Not with everyone. With 5 people specifically. The ones you think are ready to hear it. The ones who are quietly asking the same questions you are. And subscribe to this channel. Because we're going to keep going deeper. Every week. No noise, no shortcuts, just the kind of honest conversation that actually moves something. Leave a comment below. Tell me honestly, what hit hardest? And tell me what you want us to get into next. What's the question you keep carrying that nobody around you seems to be asking? I read them. Every single one.